Alright then, welcome to part 2 of MWA Tech of the snake game. So yes, last time when we were making this game, this is where we finished. And as you can see, I updated a few things here. The width and height have been declared statically. They're static variables now, global static variables, instead of, because at first I just put 500 by 500. It works, it's okay, but this is the preferred way to do things. And the last time we stopped, when we ran the game, when we clicked run project, we could see the game. This is where we ended, and we are supposed to be moving this object, the snake head at this point, which is the yellow box on the screen. But before we start creating controls in the in the game package, in the game class, we have to first create a game loop. Now, let's just create a game loop class first before I explain. Right, so a game loop, its function will be to update every changes that we make in this game through our controls, through the logic class, which happens to be the game class here. We're going to write more code in this class than any other class, because this is where the changes are going to happen, where we're going to repaint with this paint component function here. So the game loop, what it's going to do, it's going to look for what it does is it loops every millisecond. So it's so quick where you can't see the changes even with a blink of an eye. So it loops really fast, and because it loops really fast, it has to also update every single changes that happen in this class. So as an example, let me pull up this diagram right here. So this is what's going on. What we first did when we saw the snake head in the game is this is what happens. This is what happened. We only came from initialize screen and game properties. This is where it happens. It starts at setup right here, and it goes through the logic section. And then this is where it stops. Nothing happens, we cannot control anything, but what we're going to do is we're going to add this right here. This is called the game loop. It's going to be responsible for redrawing everything. As I try to explain down here, it erases previous pixels and updates new pixels according to the logic. This is what the logic does. It deals with controls. It deals with conditions and statements and the repaint function, where it has to kind of change the pixels of every conditions and statements we gave it. So this is like moving the snake, or when the snake eats the food and the food has to respond to another location. So this is where the logic part happens. So let's make this game loop. Now this game loop will be a thread. So it's going to extend runnable. The reason why it's a thread is because this game, when we head into game snake here, the game snake classes, the frame creates the window where we're able to close the window if we want to, or expand the window. But the JPanel class that we extended, because we created a game class. Now this game class extends or inherits what's known as the JPanel. Now these are part of the swing utility packages which we import, or should I say classes that we import. And the JPanel works in its own separate way, because it's got the ability to repaint its operation, So what we're doing is we're taking the game class and then we're going to be updating it in our game loop here. So let's extend runnable to make it a thread. Let me show you how that's done. No, we are not going to extend. Actually, it's implement runnable, not extend. So okay, so what's happening here? When we call this method, I mean this class, which is going to be called in our game snake class where the setup happens, is we're going to call this loop. And what this loop is going to do is going to take an argument of a game class, and I mean a game object. Now this game object, we can use it within this thread, and it's going to be used essentially to update the game itself, the variables in the game and some functions in the game that we're going to create, and I'll show you what I mean. Okay, before we start to make a while loop here, we have to give it a condition of a game over variable, which we haven't yet set in the game class. So let's do that. We need to make this variable a public, and it should be static so we can access it from the outside. Public variable, and we made it a static so we can access it from the outside as such. Okay, now we have a loop, a while loop that's going on. Now this while loop will loop forever essentially, and unless this game over variable changes to true. If we were to crash the snake, or we were to crash the snake on our own tail, or any obstacles, this is what's going. This variable is going to change within the J panel, or should I say the game class, and then this loop is going to break and the whole game stops. So this is what the game loop is going to be able to do. So for now, we can now create the controls and the logic part in the game. The loop, we can update all the functions as we create them on the game first. And as well, we need to get to the main class here that's responsible for the screen, or should I say the frame. And we need to, this is where we're going to create our thread. We're going to initialize our thread right here. So thread, and remember, in the game loop, we gave it a variable, so we have to give it the game variable. Spelling. We need to start the thread. Okay, now our thread will be running in the background. And because, well, we're supposed to be using threads, if you are wondering, we're supposed to be using threads because when we create this, create frame, this becomes, it doesn't change. You cannot change this because it only runs in one thread. And what this thread does is it runs a different thread in the background that's going to be responsible for changing any updates. We will start seeing the way the snake moves will be because of this thread. Because once this is created, this gets created once and it doesn't change. For us to change anything, we need to put the logic in a different thread so that the J panel can be able to repaint and change all the features or all the changes that we see pixel wise. So let's go to the game here. Save, don't forget to save as you code, because some things will not be able to appear because you haven't saved it. So make sure to save. Let's create a direction method that's going to be used as our controls. So we need to first create a default direction where the snake will be first moving, and I'm going to make it move right, just right, without clicking anything. Once we run the game, the snake will automatically be moving right. Like most snake games, when you start them, they move. You start the game while it's moving, so we need to do that. Right. So what we did here is we created a direction method. This is going to be used to move the snake. The snake is going to be moving continuously by itself. We're not going to have to be pressing the buttons over and over again to move. So whenever we press, in this case D, the character D, it's going to move right. And when we press the character A, it's going to move left. W and S move up and down, etc. And by default, it should be always, if nothing has been chosen, it should be moving right. So what we need to do first is we have to implement a key listener. The key listener in this point will be, it'll be like a method. They'll give us sets of methods to use to be able to control the keyboard. So we can get characters from the keyboard, and we're going to use that as our control. So let's implement key listener. So when we implement the key listener, it gives us these errors, which mean that we cannot use it unless we override some functions. The functions we need to override are key release listener and the other key press listener. There are about 3 of them. We could let's implement the methods they gave us. As you can see, we've got key released, So before we try to do anything further, let's try and put the snake food in our game as well, so that it should appear in the same y-axis as the head, but different different x-axis a little bit further, so we can see as the head moves, it has to also move in the same direction where the food is. By default, the head game will be moving right, and that's where it's going to be placed in the same y-axis as the food. So let's put the food in the screen. Instead of putting it in the middle, we're going to put it in the same in the same y-axis. So food y, instead of screen height dot 2, let's put 20. And let's draw it in our surface. We already drew the snake head, and so let's draw the food. The snake food will be green. Why not? Let's make right, so the food will appear green, and it will be 10 pixels wide and 10 pixels tall. Right, so we created a function for moving the head. What happens is every single time the loop will always call this function every millisecond. So it looks at the change of the head variable, because the head variable always increases by 10, or should I say increments by 10. Every single loop, the head position will increase by 10. So if it was 10 right now, it will be 10, it will be 20 the next time, it will be 30 the next time, and it will always keep looping through this head. It will always move this head according to the amount it has so far. So that's what we're doing. We're also, before we have to set the previous location, the previous location of our snake, so that the tail will have, the tails that come along will be using these previous variables as their current x and y, so that it should always follow the snake wherever it goes. So it looks like it's following, it's like it's part of the snake, not something that's not part of the snake. So I'll show you how that happens later. Let me just solve the game loop and try to see if the controls work. Where have you guys been? These methods, sometimes they don't show themselves, but they usually do. NetBeans is a problem. I think I need to change an ID. Now we also have to put we have to put the thread to sleep so that it shouldn't be so fast. You know, this game loop will move very fast, will change very fast. I'm talking milliseconds here, so we don't want it to move that fast, or else the snake will just drift so quickly. It will be like it's just zipped by. So we need to make it at least stop for a while as it's moving, so it shouldn't be fast. And this is how we're also going to control speed later on. So let's add a thread. Let's make the thread to go to sleep. Okay, so we are done with our thread. Now let's test the game and see if the snake will move. First, the snake should be moving right by default. So we should see it moving right, and we should also see the food around further from the snake, but in the same y-axis. So let's see if things go well. Okay, the snake is not moving, but we see the food is right here, right? They're in the same line, the same y-axis. So the snake should be moving this way. Now, why isn't it moving? Let me see. Oh yes, the reason why it's not moving is because we haven't yet called Repaint. Now Repaint, it's a global kind of variable. We can put it anywhere in any class. Because we have extended the J panel, we can use the Repaint function anywhere. So I need to put it, I will put it in trace and logic, because trace and logic will be responsible for changing everything in this case. because moving the head is also part of trace. Logic is going to be some other functions we'll make. So let's just put direction and move head in this. No, we are going to keep them separate, but what we're going to add in trace logic is just the repaint function. That will be used to change the locations. Okay. Okay, so you see, right, it's moving, but we cannot control the snake, even though we already given it. Oh, right, I now know what I did wrong. Okay, so this key listener, we need to initialize it with a class so that it can be used within that class, and we didn't do that. So let's set key listener. And as well, we have to add a few things, because usually the J panel, you have to set a few things to the J panel in order to be able to use the key listener, because the key listener tends to work well with the J frame. But in order for it to also get focused to the J panel, is we have to add some functions that come with J panel. These functions are set focused. Let me type. Right, so now we can test the game and see if we can move anywhere. Still nothing. Jesus. I'm sorry, yo. I've been making some really silly mistakes here. Okay, so one thing I have done wrong is, there are two things that I've done wrong in the directions functions and in the key, in the key, in the key pressed function. So first, I don't know what's wrong with my keyboard, but for some reason it's acting up. I have to change a keyboard. You know, I'm using the desktop computer, which is, it's quite old, and it's really kind of old. Let me just say, I can't use my main PC because it has a lot of things in it. So this old computer that I'm using kind of sucks. So bear with me. Okay, so one of the mistakes I've made here, as you can see, this is a D. This is supposed to be an A, and it's supposed to be left, not down. So I was pressing the wrong buttons, and as well, this S is supposed to be down. So change that, and also change here. Here we use the switch, a switch statement. So what we have to do is we need to add this. I forgot to add the break, so that it breaks from the whole switch once it has been selected. Fine, when we run this, now the snake should be moving. Okay, so it's moving. It's moving as we want to, up and down, because the buttons have been fixed.